Hey, it's Geoff Wold and Todd Reemtsma from Davis. Again, back here talking a little bit more about energy codes. And Todd, one of the questions that has come up is who actually is responsible for administering energy codes in our state?
Well, it starts with the electrical engineer, Jeff. That the electrical engineer is going to follow whatever that the energy code that is applicable to the particular state. But then, with the choice of the lighting controls, the lighting itself, that's where it's going to start. Is as far as administration, of that energy code. Certainly, then it comes down to the electrical contractor making sure that they're following the guidelines that have been established by the electrical engineer, by what's written into that electrical code.
Is there anyone that's like checking on a building to make sure that energy code has been put in during construction?
In most cases, certainly that if we look at like California Title 24, that's a very stringent code where there are administrators of that code where they're going to go out and check after the project is complete. Recently, in the state of Minnesota, where we're located, the state is now going to start administering the application of the energy code,
That's
making
right.
sure that everything is following the energy code.
Yeah, and as we understand, that's going to be state inspectors, building inspectors that are being trained on energy code so they know what to look for to make sure it's being followed on every building that's being built. Another thing that's somewhat new is daylight harvesting. It's been around for a long time, but the new energy code change in Minnesota now states that you have to have primary and secondary zones. What does that really mean in terms of design and parts and pieces that go into a lighting control system?
Well, it certainly adds that consideration that if we're looking at, say, for example, a classroom where we've got some pretty good fenestration, that we've got daylight coming in the windows, we want to be able to use that daylight. But we know that the daylight's not necessarily going to go deep into the classroom. So we have that primary zone where the daylight can, just like, again, perhaps even turn the lights off because there's enough daylight. But then in a little bit deeper into that room, which is considered the secondary zone, that's where we're, just like the lights might be on at a different level. So certainly when it comes to the lighting control system, the fixtures, et cetera, making sure that we know the size of those zones, et cetera, that's going to be something that the electrical engineer is going to have to look at.
One question I get a lot from designers is, do we need to have separate daylight sensors, one in the primary zone and one in the secondary zone?
No, is the short answer. Certainly, we see some people do that, but the sensors can be set up to communicate to each of the zones. So, by looking at that available light level, that the zones can be set up to coordinate control. That again, using that example, that perhaps that primary zone has adequate daylight and might even go to an off state, but that secondary zone might just go
Right.
to a dimmer level.
Yeah, and of course, everyone's product is a little bit different, so not everyone's daylight sensors can control two separate zones. But the way that it works with sensor switch and Nlight, anyway, products that we represent, is that one daylight sensor can have an offset for primary and secondary zones. So you can use just the one daylight sensor. Do you usually see that as a separate sensor, or is that built into a motion sensor that's already in the room?
Quite often built right into a motion sensor so that we can have fewer devices on the ceiling. Certainly, that's an aesthetic that the architects like to
Yeah.
have that. And then the other option that we see happening quite a lot is embedded controls, where the sensors, like both the occupancy, vacancy sensor, as well as the daylight sensor, might be built right into the fixture
Right.
for that control.
And what I've seen a lot is the motion sensor isn't always in the same spot as a daylight sensor because they're doing different things. So if you've got a motion sensor that's towards the middle of the room or close enough to where the window is, then you might get away with being able to have a motion sensor and a daylight sensor built into one device. But if that motion sensor is up in the corner of the room, then you're going to want to have that's a case of where you might want to have a separate daylight sensor. But there are times when you have to just look at where the sensors are going in the room before you determine that they're built into one device.
Absolutely, and don't put your daylight sensor right above your fixture.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that kind of wraps it up for now. Again, comments below. Click on links below. If there's any questions, please reach out to us. Geoff Wold and Todd Reemtsma from Davis. Thanks.
Thank you.